I'm going to have to ask everybody to take a breath and be prepared for a change of tone. I think this is an angry paper, or it becomes one. And just as a sort of prefatory remark, I don't work in the fields of queer or political theology as such, right? I work, if I work, in like systematics in the Protestant tradition, old, dead, white, rigid. So I still have an investment in whatever that is, or in fighting with that, I guess. So this paper is sort of a volleying over something that I can't make work in that system that I've decided to encase myself in, and suggest that maybe some of you will have an easier time with it, or something to contribute that I'm incapable of producing myself. I'm going to begin with a quotation. It might be familiar. Remember those walls I built? Well, baby, they're tumbling down. And they didn't even put up a fight. They didn't even make a sound. I found a way to let you win, but I've never really had a doubt. Standing in the light of your halo, I got my angel now. It's like I've been awakened. Every rule I had, you break it. It's the risk that I'm taking. I ain't never gonna shut you out. Everywhere I'm looking now, I'm surrounded by your embrace. Baby, I can see your halo. You know you're my saving grace. In her somewhat heterodox 2011 monograph on angelology, Beyoncé, now Carter, takes for granted the singular nature of an angel to whom she refers as her saving grace. Although one may throw a lot of weight on the doctrine of guardian angels, it should go without saying that salvation in the Christian tradition comes by faith in and or service to Jesus Christ through the grace of God Almighty in unity with the Spirit. The second problem with Beyoncé's treatise here is her apparent privileging of the angelic singular, unless what Beyoncé is really asking of us is that we consider both her and her angel, let's call him Jay-Z, if she's really asking us to consider them both at the molecular level, rather than the molar, if we take it that Beyoncé follows Deleuze and Guattari in her thinking here, and that she's not addressing, let's say, Jay-Z's desire for her, but merely applying a kind of relationship slogan to an episode of desirous assemblage. In other words, if it be the case that, properly understood, the halo to which she refers lacks even an echo of the synchronic structure of a tree ring, which would clearly keep us in the language of seeking a genealogy of the angel's desire, a ramification of women in Jay-Z's acquaintance since the days of his having been a hustler baby, all of whom play some role in establishing a tree of analogical outgrowth from his mother to Beyoncé. But now we all know that Jay-Z is no angel, and it seems clear that Beyoncé has since revised her system. Besides that, the erotics under discussion here will have less to do with saving graces and come rather closer to posing the question, is a halo a mass grave? To begin with, there's a saving and then there's a saving. In a Christian context, salvation and preservation not only aren't interchangeable, but can even be established as antonyms in certain circumstances. It is the tendency, if not the raison d'etre, of angels to preserve, but not to rescue. Guardians, archivists, morgue attendants. Their odor of sanctity forever picking up more notes of formaldehyde than of frankincense. Apparently we both went with stink, which is sort of nice. In Byron's The Last Judgment, the recording angel plucks his wings bald for need of more quills to record the numbers of the dead in the lead up to the Battle of Waterloo. And of course we have Benjamin's Angelus Novus, whom I will address very little in this paper for a reason, which is because the angel of history is, not for the better, mind you, but in fact probably insupportable in any system of religion in which the Messiah has already arrived. Christianity, especially as expressed in Protestant theology, cannot avoid having claimed to have found the center of history, perhaps even of having discovered history at the center of time. I was on a roll and now I've lost my place. And perhaps of having made time the very center of its universe. The record of Christianity shows a developed tendency to mark with a cross a great sinkhole, an amnesia, a gracious glaucoma in the mind's eye of God, where Benjamin's angel stares backward at a bone pile of progress. Protestants have killed their own recording angels in defense of Jesus Christ's sufficiency as a savior and in deference to the simultaneous, time-indifferent Father, accidentally thereby establishing a systematic theology that can establish body counts by no higher authority than reference to Reuters. The very thing that makes Benjamin's last angel so eerie is tied up in this. Angels aren't the Messiah. There's not one of them. There can never be one of them. It's been on our records, at least since Augustine's time, that angels are plural at inception. They are created in their infinite or near infinite number all at once, never suffering corruption, never requiring generation. A ready-made holy mafia. This stands in direct contrast with the first man, Adam, whose singularity is requisite for the cancellation of a genealogy of corporate sin in the singular God-man, Jesus Christ. This gives us one critical starting point. It isn't easy to analogize from a mob. According to Pseudo-Dionysius, a Christian Neoplatonist of the 5th century, any attempt to fill in an image of the angels from our vantage inevitably leads to, quote, the absurd, counterfeit, and emotional. And besides, he says, in the mere attempt to figure multiplicity in its earthly reflection, quote, one would likely imagine the heavens beyond are really filled with bands of lions and horses, that the divine praises are, in effect, great moos. But this again points toward the whole point and problem of angels in the Christian system. They cannot be God, they cannot be human. They do nothing so useful as to create or sustain. They seem incapable of doing anything as fascinating as dying, and so don't seem to have much of a life. They exist to form a hinge or synapse, or to perform some kind of necessary translation, the purpose of which has been outmoded by the incarnation, transfiguration, and resurrection of Christ. The idiotic convention whereby Feuerbach wished to end the alienated state of Christians, who could be turned from, quote, half-beast, half-angel into human beings, is, first, that there is anything inherently wrong with being entirely self-alienated, or thinking that there is anything inherently desirable about being whatever the hell a fully integrated human being looks like, but second, in imagining that a manifold of alienations could be reconciled by reinscribing the one mediator, if only this one Christian mediating principle could be turned on its head. Departmentalized philosophy has proved as much of an imaginative failure as our pathetic and dying institutionalized Christianity. The venture of both is to fend off complexity by resting on a small handful of central principles. Meanwhile, both are, and always have been, already up to their necks and fit to be buried in all our extraneous and excessive mediators, the mass, or mob, or great moo of irreconcilable angels. Here, having shouted out philosophy in the midst of what is, I suppose, chiefly a critique of Protestant Christianity, and so a self-critique, I should insert a bit of brief apology for the title of this paper, or at least for my use of the word monadology, and put one foot outside of an otherwise internecine argument. The angels, taken qua objects of metaphysical speculation, have a long history of being accounted for as excessive mediators on the records of scholastic theology, particularly in terms of the ways which the limits of human cognition were discovered and discussed. There would be no Descartes wafting on, even through the Enlightenment, veiled in footnotes containing the adjective Jesuitical. That is, no pre-modern poster child for the self-alienated subject, if there had not first been his demon of doubt. And tradition has ineradicably erred by believing Descartes rather than his demon, if you ask me. It is not without reason that Jacques Maritain refers to Cartesian theories of mind. I'll crystallize this as the notion that human thought may be purified of sensory distraction, of deliberation, that a kind of immediate intuition is a plausible ideal, under the heading of Descartes' angelism. And it is no coincidence that Leibniz's disagreements with Descartes, the author of the Monadology, Leibniz, with Descartes, yield an even more contentious, and from the vantage of the theologian, more influential kind of angelism. It was, in fact, to my mind, Leibniz who best achieved, on the part of particulars and with reference to angels, what Feuerbach seems to have failed to accomplish on the part of humanity with reference to Christ. The primary definition of a Leibnizian monad is a simple substance generated by continual fulgurations of the divinity, entelechies, or actualities, for which he best likes the euphemism perfection havers. Aside from Leibniz's use of the term generated, where theologians are constrained to say created and sustained, this definition is identical with the most generally accepted definition of the angels given in the scholastics. Insofar as scholasticism approached the angels via attempts to square Neoplatonism with the Aristotelian scheme of things, hylomorphism, matter-form hybridity, makes attributions of simplicity to anything outside of the unmoved mover an awkward affair, and whether a simple substance could be in some way organic and bodied or not was a chief point of contention. On Aristotelian lines, for example, this marks a rift between Muslim illuminationists, who generally took the view that insofar as light has form and matter, so might the angels be said to do, and on the other hand, Thomas Aquinas, for whom angels become an apotheosized hierarchy of purer, and even purer thought. Later Christian thinkers disagreed with Thomas, positing spiritual matter, returning to the ether that remained known and loved more or less until Planck's theorem, rendered it as useless as Leibniz rendered the angels, although it should be noted that etherous bodies were still acceptable enough in the Enlightenment that Friedrich Schleiermacher, the grandfather of liberal theology, was okay with angels insofar as they could be described in terms that we would use to talk about aliens from outer space. But insofar as Maxwell Planck and Christian hermeneutics go, I have to take one last tangent and give the angels the last word. The fourth order of angels in Maimonides' rankings is the Hashmalim, who derive their name from Hashmal, the amber color of the breeze that blows in with the four Zdoa, or living creatures, at Ezekiel 1:4. In the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, Hashmal is translated to the Greek electron. When Francis Bacon, a contemporary with Descartes, produced static electricity by rubbing a piece of amber on a rough length of fabric, he called the phenomenon electricity. It's from an angel. I suppose I'm trying to say that although I'm about to blame Leibniz for creating the problem that I now face in wishing to resuscitate the angels for Protestant theology, this problem is one that is always in the air anyway, that what the angels are is always up in the air anyway, and that once one realizes this, the line between an anything and a might as well be everything has already been crossed. Back to the scholastics for a moment, because simple substances, of course, prove to be incredibly complicated. Each one, and there is an each here, for the angels are held to be individuals, despite there being no matter by which to establish their differentiation. Each one, pace Thomas Aquinas, also comprises its own unique species, while their genus is designated by the simultaneously broad and snobbish rational being. And so angels already begin to approach being everything by knowing everything, at least a finite everything, and at least according to their being taken in their infinite totality. And this gets uncomfortably close to the point of dissolution between being and knowing, as the point of philosophical absolution that Thomas conveniently has divinized for us all. But I digress again. For all the angels are what they are, whatever they are, insofar as they are nearer in likeness to God than any other created being. And so, like God, each contains the knowledge of this created totality in a timeless and unsegmented way, which each is also capable of communicating to others of its order, and also to humans who exist at an impossible distance of imperfection from their lofty ranks, which is nonetheless not impossible on account of the analogical seepage that holds all of this together. In all creation, the distance between everything and its other can be marked only on a gradated scale of degrees in perfection, all reflecting God with more or less glitter or obscurity. There are no cracks where the light gets in, just a preordained relative dispensation of Windex. The point is that it was Leibniz who realized that if this whole disco ball cosmos hung on the reality of multiple and multifarious, but at once wholly inexplicable and unidentifiable presence of infinitely many species containing angels, that is, if the fullness of the order of things was dependent upon an uncountable class of beings whose chief task is simply to reflect, and in so doing, to maintain the totality of everything else that exists in a kind of trademark entirety, then the scholastic doctrine of angels leaves open the door that an angel, insofar as its function goes, could be anything, or could at least get between anything and anything, thereby reconciling and reducing anything and anything to bearing a certain likeness to each other. And better, or worse, this is already inscribed in the theological record far earlier than Aquinas and the scholastics, for Augustine declared, Angelus officii nomen est non naturae, an angel is the name of an office, not of a nature. It is because Leibniz took the angels more seriously than perhaps any theologian ever had done, and saw with real clarity and realized with profound consequences that he could say that angels were everything. So that's what the monadology is, the materialization of the angels and the angelification of everything, which is at once a de-angelification of the angels themselves, insofar as anything I attempt to correlate them with will have already been exhausted by the Leibnizian monad. Section 61 of Leibniz's Monadology gives a good repetition of his own angelism, his anti-angelism, his organic everythingism. Quote, "For all is a plenum, and thus all matter is connected together, and in the plenum every motion has an effect upon distant bodies in proportion to their distance, so that each body not only is affected by those which are in contact with it, and in some way feels the effect of everything that happens to them, but also is immediately affected by bodies adjoining those with which it is itself in immediate contact. Wherefore, it follows that this intercommunication of things extends to any distance, however great. And consequently, every body feels the effect of all that takes place in the universe, so that he who sees all might read in each what is happening everywhere, and even what has happened or shall happen, observing in the present that which is far off as well in time as in place, symphonia penta, as Hippocrates said, the harmony of all, or all harmony. But a soul can read in itself only that which is there represented distinctly. It cannot all at once unroll everything that is enfolded in it, for its complexity is infinite." From this, maybe we can really only dwell on the last line and redound to Thomas Aquinas' love of distinct representation and knowing without confusion, and find ourselves returned to a zero-sum game. May the angels know themselves better than I know myself, I pray, amen. All we can do is repeat with Augustine that Angelus officii nomen est, and consent to the fact that a defense of the angels is merely a defense of erecting a bureaucracy of the spirit to avoid confusion. It's hardly coincidental that Deleuze and Guattari's nomadology takes up shamanism in the spirit world that represents a confusum, or more colloquially, a clusterfuck of appearances and instantiations to the trained third eye of the Christianized mind. Whether the move is intentionally performed or not, such a mutation of the monadology can only succeed in re-introverting the angelic order in order to extrovert it again outside of departmental philosophy, but at once back in the pocket of a certain paganism that has always been latent in them anyway. But the return to the confusum may be all that the angels ever desired, that is, their own indistinction from anything or from everything, and perhaps I have underestimated an unusual strand of reverence in Leibniz. This is not, by the way, to say that our angels are de facto demonic for wanting to be undifferentiable, for celebrating the accomplishment of their own indistinction. That misapprehension isn't even particularly religious. Demons are capable of making unity from multiplicity. I am legion. We are legion. And angels dissemble in the presence of humans at the voice of the angel in Daniel 10, which is, quote, like the roar of a multitude. For Augustine, and it is somewhat similar for Aquinas, the condition of the fallen angel, of the demon, has something to do with disorder, but it's also weirder than that. It's reducible to the fascinatingly horrible state of being the senseless subject of eternal mood swings. That's it. As good angels are pure intellects disembodied from any sensory apparatus, bad angels must be likewise disembodied to share the same nature, but they're pure affect, and despite having no experience of time, cannot remain in the same mood. Eternity measured in the alternation of tragic and comic masks under which there is no face, or something like that. Make of it what you will. But as I close, also consider for a moment that all three of the Abrahamic faiths have spent an immense energy demonstrating that different theologies direct themselves towards essentially different gods. All, however, remain more or less complacent to ignore that they still share the same angels, in some cases even in name. If the angels are real, as I contend they must be, although I speak only for Christians, but, I mean, if you live in the Western world and claim to be a Christian, but do not believe in the angels, you do need to be told that you're just a second critique Kantian by social osmosis whose church membership is reducible to your desire to want to be a club that values old blood, and that you're nothing but a sentimental ethicist with a rather wan sense of imagination. But look, if you believe that the angels are real, and you belong to one of the Abrahamic faiths, I don't speak representing Yale Divinity School. For the record, I represent myself, maybe the angels, but not Yale Divinity School. But look, if you believe that the angels are real and you belong to one of the Abrahamic faiths, then the rather frightening corollary is that if we've got anything right about the angels and fewer things right about our God, then those angels are more than likely capable of running amok between denominational lines, and even of transporting themselves with ease, now in the camp of one Abrahamic faith, now in the camp of the other, which, here or there, has appointed some poor, incompetent human being as exterminating angel of its own apparent enemy. And all the while, the same angels translocate from side to side without distinction, the same sparks and the same fires whose purposes are the same, and which lead to the same body count taken by the same legion of bald-winged angels who pick themselves to pieces for want of quills. These are at any rate the kind of conditions under which a last angel and an actualized Messiah could be thought to coexist. And so even beyond the problems of appropriation, there are reasons why a Christian theologian ought not to be too quick to adopt Benjamin's Angelus Novus for herself. At any rate, I have no answer to the Protestant embarrassment about our teeming population of angels, and I'm concerned that ecumenical, interfaith, and interdisciplinary interventions may remain inadequate to satiate their apparent bloodthirst. If we're honest as theologians in the Protestant tradition, I mean, I'm not a real theologian, but I will be for now for the purpose of implicating the real ones. If we are honest as theologians, we need to admit that we come forth into discussions with those outside of our faith, our discipline, our own closely held beliefs within our faiths, our disciplines. We come forth into the world with a botched system, that the sluicing function of philosophical compartmentalization has not entirely cleared off for us. We come forward always forgetting or trying to hide all these unaccountable angels, these hordes and masses and packs and strays, our angels whom we abandoned to a science that granted them such free rein that they've become feral beings, still close to God for their part, but long since unacquainted with any of the niceties of community or fidelity. In any case, if you have any idea what to do with them, I extend an invitation from the ground of our failure.